Welcome to the Black Swan Brief. Today, we're talking about schools and why they've become such a consistent target for cyber attacks. Not by accident, unfortunately, by design. You've got high volume data, busy environments, and hundreds, if not thousands, of identities logging in every day. And that's where most of these attacks start now. Not with some complex hack, but with a login, a phishing email, a compromised attack, someone getting access who shouldn't be there. From there, it can move quickly, often before anyone notices. Today, I'm joined by Sasha Roshan from Huntress to walk through what this actually looks like in the real world and what schools can realistically do to reduce the risk. Thanks for joining today, Sasha. Please tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, appreciate it, Kevin. So I think you and I have been pretty much really excited to do something together, especially with how much work you've been doing with cybersecurity and social. So just a little bit of a introduction to myself. I'm Sasha. I'm one of the senior sales engineers at Huntress. I typically get involved with absolutely everything technical with our existing partners, with things like demonstrations, presentations, but most of all, so that's near and dear to me, is education for people that are wanting to learn a little bit more about how to secure themselves and their companies.
Perfect. Thank you, Sasha. In schools, there's a little bit of a perception that schools are unlucky when something happens. But from what we're seeing, that's not really the case anymore. From the Huntress side, do you think schools are actively being targeted now rather than just opportunistic attacks?
I do agree. I don't think they are unlucky as, oh, God, we would just be unlucky one to get breached. No, I think they're actively being targeted because students' identities and obviously minors as well, they are more expensive to be able to purchase compared to a grown adult like you and I, for example. With particular students with their identities, for example, they could be used for quite a lot of dangerous things, and even a lot of illegal activities as well, which is why we have to always be a little bit more cautious with handling student data compared to, obviously just genuine people. We have to also be mindful that these are youngsters, these are minors, for example. We have to protect them. They're much more vulnerable, more naive than, people that are of our age, especially with our background in cybersecurity. So I think students are 100% more targeted, but it's not about just being unlucky. I could be able to see things out there on the dark web where probably around 1,000 to 2,000 identities have been stolen from maybe a high school, as an example, and their identities are going for around 10 cents or 10 pence per identity. That is quite a lot of money when we talk about from a grand scheme of things. And 2,000 identities is actually quite small compared to the rest that I've actually seen as well. So I think schools are more of a target because they don't have as much funding as those larger organizations that are investing a lot of cybersecurity and education to be able to protect themselves. And I think with the constrained budget that a lot of schools have as well, I think it's also a lack of education that they're just simply not aware as to what sort of evil things are out there. And the way they are finding out is when it's too late and then somebody is telling them what's just happened, this is why it's happened, this is what you didn't do. So again, this is why you and I are here recording today to talk about that education, try to get that message sooner rather than later.
Yeah, definitely, Sasha. I appreciate that. And unfortunately, there was a cyber attack on a Birmingham school just this last weekend, and it looks like a Microsoft 365 credential harvesting attack, probably originated from a phishing email. And schools now are like mini enterprises. I think once everybody moved to the cloud, you've gone from having a few local logins to thousands and thousands of online identities. And as you say, those identities are valuable for a very long time. If you can get a child's identity from reception, you can use that identity for many, many years, unfortunately. And that poor child's data is out there on the dark web when these schools, unfortunately, are victims to these attacks.
I agree, and the identity theft scares me a lot as to what sort of damage they could do pretending to be that particular individual. And you mentioned, we mentioned identities quite a lot. Obviously, when people think about cybersecurity, they always think about endpoints, right? You know, your endpoints are the most important things. Well, it's definitely one of the most fundamental things you should be protecting. Of course, these students are still learning, utilizing these computers, and absolutely you need your, you know, your antivirus, your EDRs, for example, not just relying on antivirus. We'll get into that in a moment. But when we talk about a single identity compared to a single endpoint, we could do far more damage with an actual identity itself, because we can pretend to be someone. You know, it's kind of like walking into a house and that CCTV cameras have spotted you, but you're actually the person that should be walking into that house. So it's about mimicking those identities, but also utilizing that identity to potentially email somebody, you know, acting as that person and sending them something which could contain malware. And you've just laterally moved and spread that to another organization or another school, perhaps. It is endless. It does get me very nervous, you know, especially with things like, and again, we've got so much to talk about today, but I don't want to hit into it too soon. Even artificial intelligence is playing a massive game right now. But identities, at least from my side at Huntress, we see around 65 to 70% of our overall detections come from identity-based attacks. I mean, that's saying something, you know, that is a lot.
Definitely. Well, that was going to actually be my next question. So you've covered that one already. I was going to ask you, are you seeing more identity attacks rather than traditional endpoint attacks? So yeah, I think that's where a lot of schools and businesses now need to focus their attention, really. They've got the corporate firewalls, they've got their antivirus, they've got the EDR, but I think the ITDR, the identity threat detection and response, is the next big thing for people to look at. You said there, Sasha, about when they've got that identity and they are sending emails as that person. And that is something we are seeing a lot of in schools. Somebody will fall for a phishing email. They'll give away their username, password, and their MFA token. And then they'll send out emails to every single school across the country as that person. And unless anybody's actually monitoring the identities, monitoring the dashboards and seeing this impossible travel, so they've logged in at Birmingham once and then they're logging in somewhere else in the country 5 minutes later, unless anybody's monitoring for that, it's just not getting picked up, unfortunately. And your firewalls and your EDR software just won't prevent those sorts of attacks. So ITDR is the next crucial thing, and that's what we're seeing at Black Swan.
Yeah, I agree. I think you know, it's time and talent, I always say, and this is for all organizations, and schools are definitely one of them as well. You don't have the time to monitor this 24/7, but also it's also about the talent. Do you have the internal talent to be able to identify this is a real threat compared to, oh, this is a false positive as well? It's about combining those two things. Those are the two sort of pains I see pretty much all organizations that come up to me saying, Sasha, I just don't know if this is something that I should be dealing with. Because as we know, cyber attacks don't just happen between 9 to 5 or school hours, for example. You know, a good threat actor, should I say, will know the right time to start coordinating their attack a little bit better, because they know not so many eyes are going to be on the environments. So I typically see sometimes attacks happening 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And the question is, I do ask people when I'm trying to almost kind of like test their cybersecurity incident response plan, is, right, an incident happens at 1 o'clock in the morning. What do you do? Oh, I'm asleep already. Then that's a big issue right there. And I was like, okay, well, the first 15 minutes of a cyber attack is the most important one. If you don't have the eyes that are monitoring the environment and can be able to not only detect but respond to those threats as well, you're opening up yourselves to a massive sort of downtime, and the damage as well, even reputational damage, lasts for years.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing that as well. And it could be like 3:30 in the afternoon when traditionally the kids have started going home. We see a lot of cyber attacks coming at that time. But the school holidays are a big one as well. Schools take 13 weeks a year. They have school holidays for 13 weeks of the year. And the cyber criminals know that. The local authorities, the multi-academy trusts, they produce their term timetables so they can look online and see when it's likely to be a bit of downtime. So they're looking at all this information and just doing a bit of research on it, on their targets beforehand. So definitely they know what they're looking for. Yeah, it's scary, really.
It is scary, and I think the bad actors probably know if they're targeting students, they probably don't need to put so much time compared to, a seasoned, let's say, for example, a seasoned individual in a, let's say a 40 to 500 company that's probably getting a lot of cybersecurity education every month, for example. Students, obviously, not as educated, a little bit more naive, probably clicking too fast, for example, where there's some clear red flags that they could have been able to watch out for. And I think, well, not think, but I'm very sure, and I could probably bet on it, that the bad actors are relying on those sort of gaps of knowledge that these students have, and sometimes it's not just the students, it's also the staff that we need to watch out for as well. As we're not saying anyone's perfect, but definitely students are more vulnerable to these sort of types of attacks, not just at school but also outside of school as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but going back to what you're saying about the staff, the average school business manager on a Monday morning, they get up, they go into school, they've probably got about 100, 150 emails to go through in that Monday morning. And the cyber criminals know that. They're putting that pressure on. They're sending an email that looks a little bit familiar. It's not like the Nigerian scams anymore, these phishing emails. The threat actors are using AI to produce them. You're not looking for spelling and grammar mistakes anymore. The logos look pretty much perfect. It even has links that are credible in there. So they definitely know what they're doing, but the pressure's on the staff to just click on these emails and clear them down. So I can understand why
before
so many actually slip through the net, unfortunately. Just looking at a typical cyber attack then, Sasha, what normally happens in the first hour after somebody's clicked on a link and the account's compromised? What do you tend to see at Huntress?
So that's a fantastic question. So let's just say, 9 o'clock, the click happens and they give up their credentials and they give up their MFA and the token theft has happened. So token theft is basically, just for the audience, is a way that they can be able to bypass MFA and steal effectively a session that you may have, and a bad actor could be able to steal that actually quite easily nowadays. And if anyone's not too sure on how that works, you could absolutely check out my YouTube channel. I've got a couple of videos on that. It's incredibly sophisticated, but at the same time it's incredibly easy as well. So let's say 9 o'clock that happens and they manage to bypass MFA and gain access. A lot of people say, right, so what do they normally do? Then immediately they're starting to change passwords. MFA, for example, they're putting their their mobile device on there, something that they have control over, to be able to get those OTPs. Any way that they could be able to disrupt the official user to get back access to that environment. Adjacent to that, what they do, so they created persistence that they can try to be able to log in again if they needed to. The second thing that they tend to do is to be able to start looking at emails. Is there anything immediately that they could be able to get their hands on? And one of the things that they tend to do is they end up creating inbox rules to be able to forward, let's say, for example, invoice payments from one location to another location, where that second location is something that they have access to. Okay, so again, that's persistence. The third thing that I commonly see is that they would download a legitimate application. We call them rogue applications. Now, these applications basically have incredibly advanced permissions that if they leverage those permissions, they could be able to effectively do some malice with them. So there are some applications that give them backdoor access. They can leave and come back anytime they want. There are some applications that allow them to be able to review their emails. Who are the most common individuals this identity has been communicating with? And they're thinking to themselves that, oh, if I know those one or two people that this identity has been communicating with, there's already a level of trust. So if I just acted to be this person utilizing their email address, I can ask them to download this PDF and, hey, I now have access to that computer or that environment. And again, there was a real life scenario that happened not too long ago, which I ended up presenting last week on it. So this is just ITDI in general, identity threat detection and response. What happened was one of our partners and customers managed to go to a conference. communicated with a contractor, and they said, you know what, this is something I really need to have a look at. Could you please send me an email with some more documentation? They went home and they received their email. And all of a sudden, when they clicked on the link to sign into Microsoft 365, their token and their credentials got stolen. Okay. How did that happen? Well, it's quite interesting. The contractor themselves were already breached. Their identity got taken over. And what that hacker had noticed was the contractor that was going to send the documentation to the end customer had already drafted the email. And what they noticed was the link. They took away the link and they replaced it with a malicious link that looks pretty much identical, and they left it there, ready for the contractors to send it, and then the end user clicking on it, giving up their credentials. Now, luckily, the end user had ITDR. So yes, their credentials got stolen, but the Huntress ITDR actually stopped it. Okay, we've got a detection, a response rate, also mean time to respond of 3 minutes, so very fast. We actually managed to identify that and stop that and isolate the user, so that person was safe. But the contractor's identity wasn't safe. So what am I saying over here? Supply chain risk. We always have to be careful with who schools use. It's not just anyone that they use. Everybody needs to be vetted or have some level of cybersecurity. Okay, so even their contractors that they use for things like warehouses or maintenance, for example, electricians, all of them should be able to start reviewing their cybersecurity as well. So it's not just your internal infrastructure, it's also who you're working with as well. And the best person to be able to help give that advice right now would be the MSP. So Kevin, obviously your customers rely on you. You're that expert voice, and as you know, that you're not only protecting them, you're also making sure that whoever works with them has to also have a level of cybersecurity as well.
Yeah, definitely. The supply chain thing is really big at the minute, and it's something the government are actually pushing through the Cyber Essentials certification. So a lot of the big building companies now, the CISOs from the 4 largest construction companies, they're actually mandating Cyber Essentials for all of their supply chain. So that's electricians, plumbers, HVAC, painters and decorators, scaffolding companies. I've even heard taxi drivers are having to have it. Anybody who's actually taking actually taking construction workers to site. So that's an interesting one. I've not actually covered any taxi drivers yet, but trades is an area we do look at and we do support. So the whole supply chain is the crucial thing. And even I've heard strawberry growers from Wimbledon who supply into Wimbledon tennis tournament. They're having to go for Cyber Essentials now because they're part of the critical national infrastructure. So cyber security kind of affects everybody. People think of the large organizations, the large corporations, but it affects everybody now, doesn't it? It's Absolutely. Everybody from a one-person business up to a massive multinational. So if you're part of a supply chain, it is crucial you've got this cyber security and this cyber protection in place. So yeah, it's fantastic stuff, Sasha. Thank you very much for that. Leads us on nicely to the human factor. A lot of what we've talked about so far comes back to people, and I think sometimes it gets a little bit misunderstood. At Black Swan, we like to look at the psychology of a cyber attack. We mentioned earlier, staff are busy, they're under pressure, emails look legitimate. I would say that it's not that people are careless. Sometimes it's the environment makes it easy to get caught out. Do you see the same patterns again and again when incidents happen?
When we're talking about where people have been successfully phished, I think I released something not too long ago as well. If you put 10 people behind a computer compared to 10 people who are working on their mobile phones and traveling, you will always see a more successful rate on the people who are traveling on their mobile phones. So when I work with organizations, they say, Sasha, we've just been breached, and they give me the story as to what's happened. They were in a rush. One of them was in a tube, and now you have internet access on the underground as well in London. And there was through rush hour, and they just saw an email and they ended up clicking on it because it looked identical to the real Microsoft 365 page. The domain was it's called typo squatting. It looks very legitimate, but it's not the actual real domain. So one we saw not too long ago was no reply at Microsoft, but it wasn't Microsoft. It was lowercase r, lowercase n, Microsoft.com. Now, even somebody who's utilizing a computer who gets to see the sender email, they would probably end up falling for that as well, because not everyone spends so much time looking at the sender email if it looks legitimate from a glance. Whereas a mobile user would pretty much have no chance, because when you use Outlook on your mobile, just as an example, or even Google, Gmail, you don't get to see the sender email by default. You actually click on the header for it to drop down to be able to showcase it. So the things that I'm seeing most commonly is that people are still rushing and they're not taking the time. Although they've been educated, that education only lasts so long unless you are continuously educating them. I don't believe cybersecurity should just be a one-stop shop and that's it. It should be a it's not a sprint, it's a journey. And the most successful companies that implement cybersecurity are the ones that continuously enforce it. Cybersecurity isn't meant to make your life hell. It's there to be able to protect the business, but ultimately protect yourselves as well. So the ones that I'm seeing happen again and again is the ones that are falling for the same things because they're not having that continuous enforcement and education. And humans aren't natural. We have our habits. We will go back to our natural habits very easily after a set period of time, which is why that continuous element is so important. And they are falling for the most basic things when they're things that we could be able to help them with, like such as red flags, such as email domains, etc., templates, even the URLs. Check them. There's small checks that can be able to make a massive difference in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. And I like what you said there about cybersecurity shouldn't be noisy. And that's kind of what we say as well. It shouldn't interrupt people's daily workflow. It should be there working quietly in the background. And that's one of the reasons I work with companies like Huntress, because it's monitored in the background. You don't get all the alerts. You don't get the noise. That's all picked up by the Security Operations Center behind the scenes. Just going back to what you're saying about security awareness training, I'm going to get on my soapbox. I do this every available opportunity in education. One of the biggest problems in schools is the Department for Education and part of their cyber insurance, the RPA cover, say that all schools have to do is watch the 36 minutes NCSC video cybersecurity training for school staff. This video is 5 years old. They have to watch the same video every 12 months as part of their cybersecurity standards and as part of their RPA cyber insurance cover. And to me, that's not security awareness training. You touched on it. You've got to be doing little and often training. A once a year video which you've watched for the previous 4 years is not going to prevent any of these things we've been talking about today, unfortunately. And I'm not here to sell cybersecurity awareness training. I'm just kind of saying you need to do a little bit more, little and often training, even if it's just a team huddle once a week, once a month, talking about the latest threats. I talk about it, a lot of it on LinkedIn. If you follow Sasha as well, he talks about some of the latest threat techniques. It's just look at some of the things we're putting out there and just kind of cascade that down to your staff. The 36-minute video is not going to protect you. You just need to do that a little bit more. Right. Jumping off the soapbox now.
No. I actually completely agree with you. And it's something that we talk about here at Huntress all the time, that, something that's like, as you mentioned, 36 minutes, it's way too long. You're probably just at that stage is more of a pain just to get through it. Whereas I feel like consistency but bite-sized is more effective. So if we do like a 10-minute video where you're learning about a different sort of aspect of cybersecurity, it's 10 minutes. By the time you start, it's ready to finish, for example, but it's impactful, it's outcome focused, and it's high level. Whereas something that's 36 minutes is probably not going to last as long. And why is it only once a year? Cybersecurity evolves daily. So we should be consistently updating that content, providing different ways to be able to educate staff. I like the physical approach, personally speaking, I like a physical approach. I like to be in front of the people and start presenting there, or I like to do it virtually on webinars, etc. Or just have a program that's just incredibly engaging, because when we provide so if someone gets phished with our Huntress security awareness training, we provide just a 5-minute training. That's all it is. 5-minute trainings. That's all they need to do. It's impactful. It's to the point, but also you are more likely to retain information during a shockable moment than you are receiving that 30-minute, 45-minute training at the end of the month, the end of campaign, or at this stage at the end of the year. So there are different ways from a psychological perspective that we can be able to enforce this, retain it, and have it actually impactful compared to, as you mentioned, that 36-minute training every year that people are probably going to forget after 1 month.
Yeah, definitely. They're auto playing it anyway. They're auto playing it while they're marking or putting up classroom displays, so they're not watching it anyway, so it's pointless. It's a tick box exercise. It's not security awareness training, unfortunately. No, I like what you're saying about it's kind of like a bit of a nudge theory, isn't it? Somebody falls for a phishing email, they get a little nudge saying, oh, this is what some of the red flags could have been, this is what you should do next time. And I think that works far better than this once a year 36-minute video which nobody watches, but you have to produce a certificate for your insurance, and if you don't have that certificate they won't pay out. So it's a nightmare in schools because they're told that's all they've got to do, so they think that's all they've got to do. But I'm all about educating people. I'm not here for the hard sell. It's all about kind of advising people of what happens in schools and kind of what you can do to prevent these issues from happening again. So I think that's leads me on nicely to the next bit, actually. Imagine a few schools could be watching this and thinking, right, what do we do next? What should we actually be doing to prevent a cyber attack?
As in, let's say, for example, right, if we can be able to implement something right now that could be able to prevent that from happening. Honestly, I think a lot of organizations are not aware of MFA, believe it or not. I think they utilize it on their personal devices sometimes, if that. But I read a statistic not too long ago for the SMB, small to medium-sized organizations, which a lot of schools fall under that as well. Around 40% don't have MFA configured correctly. That is a massive amount. When MFA is just another layer, it's so simple. It's another layer that allows you to be able to ensure that you have that multi-factor authentication, not just relying on your username and password, which is something you know, but something you have, which is your mobile phone that you need to be able to authenticate that with. Now, if you have a user, you have two users, okay? User 1 has MFA, user 2 does not have MFA. The bad actor would always go for the easiest target. Okay, you will be less of a target if you've got MFA, but as I mentioned, you are not bulletproof, such as token theft, okay, such as stealing those credentials. So that leads up to my second thing. So number one, get MFA configured immediately. Okay, it's not that, let's say, for example, the IT team is against it. I think it's just ensuring that it's enforced and ensuring that people are aware that MFA is something that you should have. Okay, I think we're doing a good message so far. I am seeing more and more organizations have it, but it's those smaller ones which are indeed not the ones which are implementing. The second thing, detect and response tools. Okay, it's all well and good that you have the right configuration, but it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. With cybersecurity, something will happen, okay, statistically speaking. So you need to detect when something goes wrong, but you also need to respond to that as well. Having your security awareness training is amazing, but that's a gradual decrease of those clicks. A good cybersecurity mental state is knowing that a user is going to click on that link. So I'm going to anticipate my staff, but also my students, to click on those links. So that's going to make me think, what is the next thing I need to implement? And at that stage is going to be my detect and response tools, your endpoints, your identities, for example. All right. And then the third thing, just, 3 things to be able to get those, get into a very good cybersecurity state. Implement security awareness training. Okay, whether that's going to be internal, whether that's going to be a platform, it doesn't matter. Just get the education sent over. So knowledge is power. If they know what's going on, they'll be more meaningful to make those checks and enjoy cybersecurity a little bit more than to be in a stage that they're only educating themselves because something has actually happened. So if you want to protect yourselves right now, a detect and response tool is the most effective way. But if you want to be able to maintain that and gradually decrease your cybersecurity risk, implementing something like security awareness training will have a long-term effect.
No, that's great. When I rolled out MFA in schools, I got a lot of pushback. It wasn't very popular at all. But when you explain what it actually is, it is an inconvenience. And a lot of schools have safeguarding rules. You're not supposed to get your phone out. And we had to do the Microsoft Authenticator on the phones just to keep the cost down. But I did get a lot of pushback. But when you explain what MFA actually prevents and how simple it is to set up, and it's an inconvenience, but it only takes 3 or 4 seconds. It's not a massive amount of time for the protection it gives you. So definitely MFA. I'm with you 100% on that. I like what you said about it's not a case of if, but when. I kind of add a little bit more to that, saying it's not a case of if, but when, and how prepared will you be when it happens. And I think it's reframing in that. I don't like selling with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but you've only got to look at the ransomware.live website and you're seeing small businesses and schools being hit constantly. So it's a good thing educating people that cyber attacks are happening, not to scare them into doing anything, but to say,
no, not at all. But it's a reality check. But,
exactly.
I guess so many people say, Sasha, I don't want to scare them. And then I turn around and say, well, I can't show any of these things because I'm just showing real facts. So I was like, unless you don't want me to show the facts, it gets very hard for me to be able to sugarcoat this. And I don't think, with cybersecurity, we should be scaring people on purpose. But I do feel like if we give them an actual reality check, no fluff, no sugarcoating, this is what actually happens. However, turning around and actually saying, this is what you need to do. It doesn't have to be vendor focused. When I educate, I'm not focusing just on Huntress. I'm focusing on education in general. And I want people to be able to take this advice and to do something with it. Now, we are always, with cybersecurity, at least from the defenders for blue teams, okay, we're always one step behind technically, because the bad actors are always finding new tradecraft, new ways to be able to get access to those environments and to do their malice. But if we could be able to educate and provide more meaningful outcomes and steps, then we're going to get as close as we can with that next step that happens with those bad actors. So I completely agree with you. I don't feel like people should be primarily focusing on trying to scare people just to be able to try and get a sell. Absolutely not. But I feel like with cybersecurity, with the way that things are going, especially with artificial intelligence as well, a lot of people are just genuinely shocked with the sort of things that are happening out there, that naturally they are like, I am scared because I never even knew that existed, and it opens up their eyes. There's so many times that I get people just, Sasha, I didn't know that was even possible, and it's actually got me a little bit more cautious. However, that conversation has now led to them to start implementing more controls in cybersecurity because they feel uncomfortable, because they got too comfortable. That's it. And when I told them this is the reality of what could happen, you'll be amazed at how many times, and I'm sure you've seen it, Karen, as well, how many times they're just like, right, I can't sleep tonight without looking into X and Y because I know that that's an issue that we have.
Yeah, definitely. I think the key takeaway from that then is you don't need perfect security. You just need better security than the next target. It's a bit like CCTV and lighting at home. It's not going to prevent the burglar breaking into your house, but it might mean they move somewhere else. And I think that's the crucial thing with cybersecurity. You've got to make yourself not an easy target. And as we've covered, I think a lot of it now is about protecting identities rather than just devices. And that's the other key crucial takeaway from that. So I think we've pretty much covered cybersecurity and education. That was going to be one of my next things, but a little bit more about educating the pupils and creating cyber defenders of the future. What do you think schools could possibly do more in terms of helping kids who have got an interest in this? I've got a colleague who used to work for Derbyshire County Council. She now works for the Information Commissioner's Office, Heather Toomey, and she wrote a report last year saying that the biggest threat to schools is probably internal rather than external. So how do you think we can get the message across to the pupils and the students in the schools that cybercrime is not a good career to get into, and cyber defending is far better?
Yeah, of course, absolutely correct. And I think the way to be able to do that is by getting involved. So got involved with, so University of Westminster, for example, that's the university that I used to study at, and my professor was like, I'm literally the same concern that you had. So a few years after me joining my cybersecurity career, I went back over there and I started educating them about cybersecurity and the sort of career paths that you can be able to make in cybersecurity. It's not just, hacking, etc. There's so many different variations of cybersecurity that you can get involved with, and it's just about piquing their interest. You could be a software engineer, for example. You could be a defender. You could be, for example, an offensive cybersecurity analyst. There's so many different avenues that you can be able to approach. For me, sales engineering, that's a good combination of being that sort of social butterfly, being salesy, but also being that engineer and getting a little bit technical. Absolutely. That is something that I got drawn into immediately. And I think if we educate the internal, the internal staff, and also, should I say, the students, as to why cybersecurity is so important and the sort of impact it can be able to do, because there's nothing more refreshing to be able to know that I've helped an organization save their business based on the things that I've done and based on the things that Huntress has done as well. It's the most rewarding thing that I could be able to think of, and definitely lifts up my spirits. And when you see them physically, it's even better. And to have that sort of, right, it's the right thing to do attitude, and to be able to ensure that we have, those ethical sort of personality traits. If you hit them early, I think we could shape up the future much more better. And I think we are doing a good job with things like YouTube and social media. It does help. However, on the other side, there's that dark side of social media that also does get them interested to do those sort of evil activities, because nowadays, to be a hacker, you don't actually need to be that smart anymore. You just need to know what tool to use. And when I say tool, I'm seeing what AI bots to use, so you could be able to get that sort of script or output or template, for example. It's never been easier. So I think educating those students as early as possible has never been more important in 2026, for sure.
No, definitely. I complained about the NCSC video a little while ago, but I'm going to give the NCSC a plug now. They do actually have a scheme where anybody interested in cyber can go on a training course through them. And the local cyber resilience centres run by the police across the UK, they have a scheme called Cyber Path as well, which I think a lot of it's university students, so it's a little bit further down the line than school students. But it gives them real world experience, and they're actually going out into businesses delivering cybersecurity awareness training as well, because they know a lot of stuff about computers, and it's turning that knowledge into good rather than evil. I think that's the crucial thing that we can do, and crime doesn't pay. You will get caught eventually. All the people who've been there was a hack in Northern Ireland over Easter, big educational thing, and I think a 16-year-old boy's been arrested for that. So cybercrime doesn't pay. Cyber defending career does. So anybody considering cyber, come to the good side, not the dark side.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think there's so many mentors out there that will be able to help you. I know we've got one of our cyber advisors as well here at Huntress that does a lot of education with things like that as well. It doesn't need to be a hard journey. If you are interested, have a chat with us, directly messaging either of us. We'd be more than happy to be able to help you and steer you to that right direction. I think a lot of the times I'm a bit too shy. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go, or what to ask. It doesn't matter. Just ask away if you've got any concerns, because as Kevin just mentioned, a 16-year-old kid's just ruining the rest of his life. For him to now try to find a decent job is going to be much more harder. Let's not put people into that situation by trying to find the easy route. And anything worthwhile isn't easy anyway. It took me years to be able to build my cyber career, and to be able to build my reputation on that as well. But it is well worth it, because I get to be able to hang out with awesome people like Kevin, whereas otherwise I'll be speaking to him through a cell, which I don't want to do. But no, it's definitely the way to be able to move forward. And it's all about education and just trying to find that thing that you find interesting, because if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. That's what I always say.
No, that's brilliant, Sasha. That's excellent. And thank you very much for your time today. It's
My absolute pleasure.
been brilliant sharing some insights with you. One thing that keeps coming up in these conversations, though, is schools aren't just targets. They're one of the few places where we can actually change the direction of this. Every student, every member of staff, the learning habits that they carry on into business, into communities, into everyday life. So while a lot of today has been about risk, there's a bigger opportunity sitting underneath it. If we get this right in schools, awareness, good habits, protecting identities, we're not just reducing incidents, we're shaping the next generation of people who spot this stuff early, question it, and shut it down. And that's probably one of the strongest messages we can give out today, really. Sasha, really appreciate your time and some brilliant insights there. And if anybody's watching this and thinking they might have a few gaps, you're not alone. And that's exactly where these conversations start. So thank you very much for watching. And thanks again, Sasha, for your time today.
My absolute pleasure. Take care, everyone.